Hey there, Internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. The class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions of the thing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would love you for it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact you're listening is awesome. And of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, ring the notification bells on YouTube, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have nobody. It is a solo show because I decided to fully commit to the bit that we've done for all of April with our Mighty Ducks month. It started as just kind of a one-off of like, hey, this new Mighty Ducks show, Game Changers, is out. And then we just turned it into D1, D2, D3. And I was like, well, we still have the animated series, so might as well do an episode on that. In large part because I just didn't get bothered to try and coordinate some people to come on and do a Falcon and Winter Soldier episode this week. So hopefully I'll try and get off my butt and do that next week. But I did put the call out to the rest of my team of like, hey, I'm going to do Mighty Ducks Animated, the pilot. Anybody want to join me for that? And I had surprisingly, shockingly, no takers. So yeah, we are doing Mighty Ducks, the animated series. Episodes 1 and 2 was basically a 2-part pilot episode. It was also, I believe, like a DVD film, or maybe even like a theatrically released film first. That was basically done as one full thing. But yeah, it is called The First Face Off, Part 1 and 2. And so yeah, why did we pick it? Again, I'm just committing to completely April 2021 is our Mighty Ducks month. And so we did the movies. Now we've done both of the Mighty Ducks shows. A little bit of history lesson on the show for you. This was originally a one-season show, originally released September 6th, 1996, all the way up through January 10th, 1997 on ABC. It was, I believe, one of the little things of trivia I have is that it was basically the last show in the like Disney Saturday afternoon series that they did. Worth noting, if you are an eagle-eyed, eagle-eared listener from last week's episode, this debuted about a month before D3, The Mighty Ducks, hit theaters. That came out October 4th, 1996, and this, as I said, came out September 6th, 1996. These two episodes that we're talking about today aired specifically on September 6th. Other notable releases of the time here, I kind of pulled in some of the big heavy hitters that we had in animation, animated series at the time. You had Hey Arnold starting its their long run on Nickelodeon. It debuted October 7th, 1996, and would run through December 1999 for seasons 1 through 4. And then I don't know what happened because I'd probably stopped watching I long stopped watching by this point, but season 5 per like Wikipedia is listed as like starting March 4th, 2000 and running through June 8th, 2004. So that one season apparently took 4 years to complete. And having seen some of that on like Avatar stuff recently of like, oh, it just kept getting like kicked around the schedule and stuff. It's like, why would you do that? Why would you not commit to like finding the space and letting your audience just know when the show is going to be on? But whatever. Also worth noting, a show called Quack Pack from Disney, debuted basically like a couple days before this show on September 3rd, 1996. It would only run through November on Disney Channel, and that was one that was basically like Donald and his teenage nephews, the kind of Huey, Dewey, and Louie, but like teenageified, I believe, going on adventures and stuff with Daisy, I believe. And then you also, of course, had Superman, the animated series, which debuted on this exact same day, September 6th, 1996, and then would run through February 12th, 2000. So had a significantly better run, I would say, than the Mighty Ducks show here. Runtimes of these episodes, pretty much 23 minutes, 23-minute episodes, pretty standard for the era. In the Disney television animation timeline of things, as I said, Quack Pack debuted 3 days earlier, started 3 days earlier. Then Mighty Ducks would start on September 6th. And then Doug, the 5th season of the show, but the first Disney season, because the first 4 seasons of Doug, of course, had been a Nickelodeon series. But then the rights transferred, or Disney bought the show. And so we got our first season of Doug on Disney, starting the day after Mighty Ducks, the animated series, debuted, September 7th, 1996, and would run through March 8th of 97. A little bit of the roll call here. We have director Doug Murphy, and this was his earliest directing work, but he would then go on to direct some episodes of X-Men Evolution, Wolverine and the X-Men, and Young Justice, to name a few of his series. The writer of these 2 episodes here was David Wise, who prior to this had worked on the Godzilla animated series of the 80s, as well as He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the Transformers, Chip and Dale, Speed Racer. He'd done kind of a handful of episodes of all of those shows, but his real probably claim to fame is he wrote and was one of the kind of co-creators of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series of the 80s, 90s, and he had worked on 193 episodes of that, according to IMDb. But then he was that was pretty much it after like this and Turtles kind of wound down. The only other real IMDb credit he had was a couple episodes of a Zorro animated series, I think also there in the late 90s, and then basically nothing the rest of his career. I believe he passed away last year, I think, if I'm remembering IMDb correctly. So yeah, this was near the end of his like active career. I don't know if he just retired at that point or what, but yeah, that jumped out at me. And then the thing that I think most surprised me as I was kind of going into this was the cast actually pretty solid for this show, for as dumb a show as this was, and as certainly short-lived and like forgettable, I guess, in the grand scheme of like Saturday morning cartoons of my childhood. This had some names. So I kind of broke it out here into our human characters, our ducks, and our saurians, who are the bad guys in the series. Human characters that are very prominently featured here in the first couple episodes, as well as throughout the rest of the series. You have Phil Palmfeather, played by Jim Belushi, of course, according to Jim fame. Prior to this, he'd basically started dabbling in animation and voiceover work, having done a few episodes of Pinky and the Brain, as well as Gargoyles, going into this series. And then he's had, a storied career kind of afterwards. Obviously, the brother of John Belushi as well, kind of, famous Belushi kin, but probably best known for his sitcom, according to Jim. And then playing Captain Cleghorn, you had Dennis Franz, basically right in the middle of his NYPD Blue powers. I want to say NYPD Blue started in like 93, and this was a series in 96. So yeah, like NYPD Blue was, probably one of the hottest shows on TV at the time. And then he's just doing this little animated thing where he's playing another detective, a detective who, as one of like my favorite running gags of these 2 episodes, is just eating the weirdest stuff when we come back from every commercial break. He's just eating a new thing that is sometimes, something you would expect, and sometimes it's donuts with ketchup on them or something. Like he is a weird guy. But I thought that was really cool. The ducks we have also, this is where I will absolutely dive in and be like, absolutely nothing to tie it to the movies we've been talking about the last few weeks. Like no character names, nothing, like just not a hint of that apart from the name of the hockey team is the Mighty Ducks. It's just a completely different thing. So yeah, we have our space-faring ducks from Puck World. Here we have playing Wild Wing. We have Ian Ziering, who prior to this had done an animated series called Biker Mice from Mars, which I do not remember at all. And he was also a long-running character on Beverly Hills 90210. And most recently, You may recognize him if you are a fan of terrible movies as Finn Shepard, the kind of protagonist hero of the Sharknado series, is Ian Ziering there. You have Jeff Bennett playing Duke Larange, which is admittedly like my favorite named character of these duck-themed names that we have, who has hundreds of voiceover credits out there, including probably most notably somebody like Johnny Bravo. He was the voice of Johnny Bravo there. And around the time of this era, he had also worked on Biker Mice from Mars, as well as he was, I believe, the narrator in the Earthworm Jim animated series. And he also had done a handful of episodes of Gargoyles. And then we have Brad Garrett playing Grin, who, of course, probably best known to everybody as Robert from Everybody Loves Raymond, or if you are a fan of Andy Cortez, the impression that he just cannot do. Around the time of this, he had also kind of started doing a lot of some voiceover work. He also rounds out like this trio of actors who worked on this Biker Mice from Mars project, and he was also doing the Spooktacular New Adventures of Casper, which I believe was the Casper animated series that was basically greenlit off of the popularity of the live-action movie of the time. I believe he played one of the uncles in that animated series. Up next, we have playing Mallory McMallard, a very notable one, especially for kind of today in pop culture. Jennifer Hale was playing Mallory back in the day. Jennifer Hale, best known to a lot of gamers, of course, as Fem Shep in the Mass Effect series, the female shepherd, and she is going to be the voice of Rivet in the upcoming Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart game, which we just, as I'm recording this on Thursday, April 29th, we just got kind of the big deep dive state of play into that game. So we'll be getting to play as her here in a couple months' time. Back around the time of the Mighty Ducks, she had done a handful of shows like Iron Man and The Tick. She'd made a couple appearances in there. But yeah, she has a very long and storied, not only acting but also voice acting career. In the 25 years since this series came out. Playing Nosedive, we have Steve McCall, who of everybody in this cast list is probably the least renowned, the one that has done the least both prior to and since the show. The only couple of credits that I pulled from his IMDb here are All Dogs Go to Heaven 2 and Secret of Nim 2, both a couple of straight to DVD or straight to video at the time sequels that had come out. So he worked on those, but not too much else in his repertoire. And then lastly, for the Ducks, we have April Winchell playing Tanya, who's another one of those with a long and storied career, has been playing Clarabelle Cow for Disney in, I think, since either the late 90s or certainly early 2000s. Definitely on like all of the recent Disney credits and stuff. She's been working on that. Around the time of Mighty Ducks, she had worked on the Sonic the Hedgehog series as well as Goof Troop. Then we dive into the Saurians, and this is where, again, we have just some absolute stellar cast members here. We have playing Lord Dragonus, we have Tim Curry, the venerable Tim Curry, of course, best known for his roles in Rocky Horror, Clue, Muppet Treasure Island, which he had done, I believe, like right around the time here of the Mighty Ducks. We have Clancy Brown playing Siege, who, of course, is another one of those, iconic voice actors in the medium. Most notably to a lot of people, probably playing Mr. Krabs in SpongeBob SquarePants. Around the time of Mighty Ducks, he had popped up as Raiden in the Mortal Kombat animated series, as well as he had started kind of one of the, I think, roles that has probably defined his voice acting career. He was Lex Luthor in the aforementioned animated series of Superman, and has done the role of Lex in a ton of DC animated stuff over the years. We have Tony Jay playing Wraith, who best known probably as Frollo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, another, around this time kind of casting as well. And then in these episodes, prominent, but not prominent throughout the rest of the series. I think he's only in a handful of episodes continuing on. But here we have Chameleon, played by venerable chameleon in voice acting, Frank Welker, who is one of those voice actors who's played pretty much everything. He has, I want to say, like almost 900 credits on IMDb. And that's like projects, not episodes of projects and stuff like that. He is one of those, I'm pretty sure I've talked about him on the show before, just does a ton of stuff. Pretty much the animal in almost everything in any kind of like animated cartoon that's just like, oh, let's have a dog barking. He's the dog barking. But also, of course, best known as Megatron from Transformers, Nibbler in Futurama. And he was also around this time, and it's one of the things that is like most popular on IMDb right now because of the 2021 version. But he apparently voiced Shao Kahn and Reptile in the 1995 film version of Mortal Kombat. And I was like, Shao Kahn isn't even in the 95 one, but he's like a voiceover, I think, at the end of the film. So it's basically like, hey, let's get Frank Welker in to do an intimidating voice, and so yeah, he's credited in that. A little bit of trivia here. When Tim Curry was approached for the role in this cartoon, he at first thought he was being offered a role in the sequel to The Mighty Ducks, the original film. As I mentioned, this was the last cartoon that was featured in the Disney afternoon lineup that included shows like DuckTales and Tailspin and Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, and Darkwing Duck, I think, was in that kind of family of shows. And then the last little bit of trivia, the name of the Ducks headquarters, The Pond, was shared with the real Anaheim Mighty Ducks Stadium, the Arrowhead Pond of Anaheim. Also, their uniforms are based on the teams, and Wild Wing was named after the mascot of the show, or named after the mascot of the team. So yeah, diving into, does it hold up and what do we think? So this is a show I definitely remember watching a handful of episodes. I might have even had some of like the action figures, just because, I was 11 years old when this show came out. So I was basically prime, let's play with action figures. And this was like like they definitely positioned this to be, and there's a ton of like kind of, not homages or anything, but like there's a ton of like crossover between like the Ducks and like their archetypes and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which of course were one of the biggest things when I was growing up. So I'm sure I probably picked up at Walmart or something like that a couple of the action figures and threw them in with my collection and would have like the Turtles fighting alongside the Ducks or something like that. It is very weird coming back to it, especially like the weirdest bit is probably a lot of the very mid-90s short bursts of CG animation that we get, that I think becomes a lot better realized when we get to shows like Futurama, where you have like a blend of 2D and 3D animation. And here it's still very much trying to kind of figure out its feet and get its legs under it. So it feels rough. And then it's also like weirdly like, oh, it'll be like, oh, the aircraft hangar is opening up, and so we'll see like a partial shot of that, and then we'll cut away immediately to like 2D animation or something more stable. It's just, there's a lot of weirdness about that, as well as the transition shots that aren't like wipes or anything. They're 3D animated pucks going into a hockey stick, whacking them out or something like that, and that's what allows the scene transition to play out. Very, very weird kind of stuff like that. But, I mean, for a mid-90s show, it's pretty much what I expect. It's look at all these ducks. Some of them have attitudes. Some of them are like, I appreciated that they, like, each of the ducks kind of has their own, personality. And we're introduced to a lot of characters in these two episodes, which I definitely had to take notes as I was going through to kind of keep track of everybody. But you have, I didn't like call him out in the credits because he's really only in a couple episodes of the series. But you have Kennard also in these episodes is kind of like the team leader who sacrifices himself so that everybody else can survive. And then like one of the kind of like subplots I think of the series became like trying to find him again in the rift between dimensions or whatever. But I think he's only in like one other episode, so I did not really bother bringing him up here. But in our core group of six ducks, we have Duke, who is like the roguish thief who, when Puck World becomes overtaken, decides to use his like Robin Hood charms for kind of good. And he got the eye patch, and kind of the roguish swagger. So he's probably one of those fun characters that I probably really enjoyed as a kid. You have Grin, who is again Brad Garrett's character, who is the big character, but is has maybe a heart of gold, or like he's a Zen master type. He almost seems like everything he's saying is supposed to be a haiku, but just isn't actually a haiku. But those are the kinds of phrases that he's using as he speaks to everybody. You have Mallory, who's like the weapons expert slash strong fighter, but she's terrible with tech. And you have Tanya as like the tech person and basically the Donatello of the group, I guess. You have Wild Wing, I believe, is the goalie. And then Wild Wing is the goalie and the kind of ends up being the de facto leader of the group after Kennard kind of bites the bucket or whatever. And then you have his brother Nosedive, who's like probably the more Michelangelo of this group. And then you have on the baddie side, you have Big Bad of Tim Curry, and then you have like the sorcerer guy. You have the as Wraith. You have like the muscle guy as Siege, and then you have Chameleon, who is basically an excuse to do a whole bunch of other pop culture references. He's almost like the genie in that, like, in these episodes, I think we see him turn into like the Three Stooges at one point, and it's basically just an opportunity for Frank Welker to do a Three Stooges bit, and has a handful of those kinds of transformations, in addition to him transforming up to like an opponent that will face off against the Ducks or something like that. So it's fun. And then again, I think probably my favorite part of these episodes is Phil constantly narrating this story to the detective who's out there trying to get to the bottom of the fact that these alien ducks have come into town and started playing hockey, and also at the same time are crime fighters by night kind of thing. And they've been doing this for a couple weeks or something. And so he's trying to get to the bottom of it and talking to the manager of the team. And Phil basically like spills the whole beans, like tells the whole origin story. That's what these two episodes is all about. And we come away from the end of it, and the detective's just like, I don't buy any of it. You think I wouldn't know if alien ducks were, taken? It's like all of the newspapers were talking about how alien ducks are now playing hockey. Like, how do you not, whatever, be the oblivious detective archetype? But really, my favorite running gag was just looking and seeing what he was eating every time we come back to him. Like, I took notes as we were going, and we have kind of the introduction. As they're back at the police station, and Phil starts kind of telling the backstory. The detective is eating burgers that he got ordered to the station. Then we come back. He pulls out of his filing cabinet a thing of donuts because, of course, cop. So you got to do that. And then when we get into part two, I don't remember. I did not. I take a note that like, we pick up on Phil's story and the detective is eating stuff again, but I didn't write it down what he's eating there. But then we get to, like, I think I mentioned earlier, he's like, at some point he's eating, a detective is eating donuts covered in ketchup, and then is this now? My question is: Detective now eating a hot dog dipped in ice cream? So yeah, he just every time we pick up with him, it's just a fun little animation running gag that like maybe somebody wrote in the script, or maybe the animators just decided to have some fun with it. I don't know, but I really enjoyed that. I got a kick out of that. As for everything else, like the story itself, pretty, I would say, by the numbers. It's very fast paced in that bad guy comes, takes over the planet. Resistance group of these ducks kind of get together, are brought together as like an elite force, with one or two people that are just kind of like not meant to be there but end up proving their worth, and then so they end up like taking out the bad guys, and presumably maybe freeing even their planet. But in the getaway, they end up doing a dimension shift and traveling to Earth and stuff, where they land in Anaheim, home of the Mighty Frogs at the time, which I thought that was a funny little thing, especially if you like piece together at the time that like WB's mascot was like Jeremy Bullfrog, and so it's like is that a veiled dig in the Warner Brothers versus Disney animation kind of thing? Who knows? Whatever. But then obviously the Ducks basically are there. They have to play hockey to keep their I wrote down the quote. We got to play hockey to keep our edge. They say as they're checking out a comic shop and just doing very normal things, and people are just very immediately accepting of these humanoid-looking ducks just hanging out. The Ducks basically end up becoming the team, and Phil basically writes them into contracts. I appreciated this line from Phil as he's going through the narration, that the Ducks worked it into their contracts that all of their earnings would go to the secret base under the pond, and basically all of the tech and all the weapons that they end up using throughout the series. And he basically says, "My lawyer missed that one. He's making hot dogs now." Thought that was a wonderfully delivered line from Jim Belushi there. And yeah, it sets up the premise of these guys are going to be hockey players by day, and so we're going to see a handful of those kinds of like a hockey matches, and then crime fighters by night. And so that's basically going to be the premise. It is again has absolutely nothing to do with the series, with the series of films of the same name. Just, hey, let's take alien ducks, and they just for whatever reason really like hockey, and let's bring them in here, and they're gonna Darkwing Duck and fight crime by night and stuff like that too. Meanwhile, the Dragonis team, they're struggling here, trapped on Earth as well, because their power has been like destroyed and stuff, and they're basically trying to get their tech back up and working. And all they really have is some occasionally shifting cloaking tech that occasionally lets them be a mountaintop or a building, but then occasionally like it flickers and you see the ship underneath. And yeah, the kind of two-parter ends on a fun little bit of like, I can't believe you, like the Duck saying, I can't believe you told them like our story, Phil. What the heck, man? What about our secret identities and stuff? He's like, no, you gotta put that all out there, because you gotta think of the merchandising deals. You gotta think of like the action figures, the comics, maybe even a cartoon, with a big old like wink to the camera kind of little bit there. And yeah, it was just it's a fun dumb show of the 90s. I had a good time with it. I mean, certainly a better time with it than D3 last week, and maybe even D2. Like thinking back on what like what I remember D2 being growing up versus what I think of it like now rewatching it. Like this, I knew to have no expectations going into the animated series, and it surpassed those low expectations. So it was a fine fun time. So yeah, I think on a report card, it's not great. It gets a solid C for me. Maybe even C plus. I have zero interest in continuing to watch the series. Although looking at some of the like episode descriptions on IMDb, there's like a whole bunch of the episodes that are just like in this homage of big film name here, like one of the episodes I think near the end is like Duck Hard, and it's clearly a Die Hard homage or something like that. And so they basically just started doing episodes that were just like ripping the plot from other things, including like obscure 50s movies that I did not at all recognize and stuff. But yeah, it was just, it was a dumb one season, 4 5 month show from the middle of the 90s. And it's now on Disney Plus, and a whole new generation of people can be introduced to it, and that's just weird to me. Especially if they, take up if they're watching the Game Changers series that kind of sparked this whole month of dumb content from us, and say like, oh, what's this cartoon, based on the Mighty Ducks, and they go and watch that. Like, who knows if they're gonna really enjoy it? And again, pretty good cast behind it. I gotta say, like, especially with like Tim Curry and Clancy Brown in there, and Jennifer Hale and Brad Garrett. Like, lots of solid people, and Dennis Franz and Jim Belushi, of course. Like, yeah, like solid cast behind this, and I'm sure they were having fun. They showed up, they did a couple of weeks worth of work, and then got a nice little paycheck for a few months' time. So yeah. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this one. This is the first one really that like dives away from like, hey, we're just gonna recommend all of the movies in the Mighty Ducks universe, because this very much is like, hey, here are the other animated shows that you might like if you like this thing, and they are Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, DuckTales, the old one, not the new one, which I believe also has its third season coming out today as this episode airs, which I'm very much looking forward to. Third and sadly final season, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing and returning to that series because it was friggin' phenomenal. You had Goof Troop came out around this time and is one of the recommendations there. Tailspin, Darkwing Duck, Bonkers, which is a show I had completely forgotten existed until I saw this thumbnail. It's like the Bobcat or whatever, who's a police officer, I believe. Gargoyles, and the aforementioned Quack Pack with Donald. Extracurriculars, what else are you watching on Disney Plus? I did, of course, finish Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I very much look forward to discussing that somewhere down the line. Again, I will try and hopefully, knock on wood, get that get something together for next week's episode, and do a Falcon Winter Soldier kind of retrospective now that the dust is settling and all that stuff. But phenomenal show. I really enjoyed it. Had a great time with it. I understand a lot of people thinking like, oh, it didn't stick the landing. But for me, the most important aspect of that series was very much Sam's story and basically everything surrounding it in terms of the Isaiah Bradley stuff, the Bucky stuff. I thought all of those were really handled. The places I think are a little weaker that I'm sure we'll dive into when we do a deeper dive is like the John Walker stuff felt a little rushed. Flag Smasher stuff, I think, I think I agree with a lot of people that felt weak, and whether or not that was as a result of COVID or just it was already a lesser story. I would have liked to have seen, like, it had some good glimmers. In particular when Carly and Sam kind of have some heart-to-heart conversations throughout there, but ultimately fell a little lacking. And then also some of the Power Broker stuff, I wasn't a huge fan of how that resolved. But yeah, I look forward to finding some people to sit down and talk about that with in a future episode. But that is going to do it for this episode. Oh, I'm also continuing to watch. I haven't talked about it a lot on the show, but I have every week continued to watch the Mighty Ducks live action Game Changers series that again kicked this whole thing off, and I'm really enjoying that. It's it's a fun little new take on the story. It's got a lot of Gordon Bombay, which, as Logan and I touched on in a couple of our episodes, is like the heart of the series, and so it's really great having him very much more present, certainly than D3. And I look forward to kind of seeing his story continue, as well as kind of this new batch of kids, especially the episode that is going live, or that went live today. The episode the day this episode goes live is the like long mentioned and kind of highlighted reunion episode where we see a lot of the old Ducks kind of come back and hang out with Bombay and stuff. So I look forward to seeing that little bit and how they interact with one another. But yeah, that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Did not expect to talk more than a half hour on this one. I thought this was going to be one of those, really short, 20-minute episodes or something like that. But had a lot to say apparently about the Mighty Ducks animated series. So thank you for joining me for this episode. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. You can follow all the stuff we do over at That Nerdy Site. I will give the plugs to all of our YouTube content. It's become my go-to plug these days, but we're having a lot of fun doing our Let's Play series. We're right now in the middle of our Let's Play of me and Logan playing It Takes Two, playing through that series, and then those are going out on Tuesdays right now, and then on Thursdays, our episodes of Cameron playing through Emily is Away 3 have been going live, and those have been kind of a fun little, like, Tuesday, Thursday treat, in addition to, again, all of our video versions of all our podcasts go up Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays with the podcasts themselves. So you can check out all that over on the YouTube, youtube.com/thatnerdysite. If you liked what you heard, once again, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Ring the notification bell if you do subscribe on YouTube so you know when new episodes of everything go live. And if you do feel like supporting us, you can always help us out on Patreon, patreon.com/thatnerdysite, where every patron gets early access to our monthly bonus episode of That Nerdy Site show, which I recorded with Logan last night for this month, for basically the end of April through May. And it was basically him and I sitting down and talking about a thing he loves very dearly, James Bond, and what makes a good James Bond movie. And we kind of talk about a lot of the elements of James Bond movies, and some of his favorites, both his favorite elements, favorite Bonds, favorite villains, favorite eras of Bond, all that stuff. So check that out. If you support us on Patreon for $1 or above, anybody gets access to that. And if you don't, it'll go live the end of May for everybody else, to the public. So yeah, thank you for joining me. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.